Welcome. I'm Richard Few, founder and chief geek here at Sales Geek, and I am delighted to welcome Tim Bardgett. Tim is our furthest away geek, I think, as it stands at the moment in the UK. And today we're going to have a little bit of a chat with Tim about his journey, which is still quite young. He's one of our newest geeks as well, and we get to learn a little bit more about Tim and the journey that he's been on so far with Sales Geek. So a big welcome, Tim.
Hi, Richard.
How are
Really
you?
great to see you. Yeah, really good. Thank you. Yeah, really good.
Awesome.
Working out of the office today, slightly different background, but yeah, in a hot desk environment. But yeah, really good. Thank you.
It's quite a cool background. Looks like an old
I
building.
like it. Yeah. In the Royal William Yard in Plymouth. So yeah,
Awesome.
really nice place to be.
Fantastic. Well, listen, I'd love if it's okay with you. I know I've introduced you by name and the fact that you are a long way away from us, but would you mind just giving, I suppose, anyone that's listening to this just a little bit more of an intro to you and some of your backstory before Sales Geek?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Tim Bardgett from Sales Geek in Cornwall. So as Richard said, probably the furthest territory away from Blackburn in the UK, and joined Geek recently in October 2025. So in terms of the journey with Geek at the moment, at sort of month four, so early on really in my journey. Um, in terms of from a personal point of view, being in sales roles since for 25 years in various sales roles in business to consumer early on, which was really good grounding, and then sort of moved into business to business and more sort of consultative type sales in the construction sector. So 25 years in sales, 20 years of that is specifically in the construction sector, in distribution of materials and working for manufacturers of materials. Heavily emphasized on specification sales, as I touched on, and worked my way through the ranks. I guess from entry level to business development roles through to yeah, sales leadership management and sales director positions. Yeah.
Awesome, awesome. So, if you wouldn't mind just sharing with I guess anyone that's watching this, how did you originally come about finding Sales Geek, and kind of what was your journey to, I suppose, becoming a geek, really?
Yeah. So Sales Geek, I think initially came on my radar from LinkedIn activity. And I think it may have even actually been where there was a role sort of advertised as sort of sales director within Cornwall, which is kind of geographically can be quite unusual. As I said, we
Yeah.
live in an area, or I live in an area where those sort of roles don't crop up. So I think I may have seen that originally, just out of interest, had a little look, and then lots of sort of social and LinkedIn content from Sales Geek was consumed, and really interested in the journey that obviously you'd been through, Richard, but also of Geek and how it was really growing some momentum and how they're engaging with the customers and sort of ultimately sort of adding value and I guess that sort of passion to change the way the world perceives sales. I've been involved with the Institute of Sales Professionals, which Geek are as well. So I've been involved with that institute personally as well. And there was some shared common ground in terms of what we were trying to do and our passion towards doing sales properly, I guess. So I'd seen lots of stuff on social media, particularly like I said, LinkedIn, and thought that it could be something that may interest me effectively. And then yeah, reached out obviously to Geek to find out more.
And what was it about your, I suppose, either personal circumstances or kind of work situation where you contemplated doing something else other than doing what 99% of most people do, which is staying in a job or getting another one and just sort of carrying on that path for another 10, 15, 20 years? What was it about those circumstances which meant you wanted to explore an alternative path?
Yeah, I guess as my roles had progressed over the years, I think I'd stretched myself possibly a little bit sort of geographically. I guess I was staying away from home quite a lot, so living in Cornwall, but working with distributors and manufacturers and being employed by businesses up in the north in sort of Sheffield and Chesterfield area is sort of yes, probably a 6 hour, 7 hour drive, I guess, back down to Cornwall. So not that I was in head office all the time, but naturally doing either a national or a regional role from Cornwall came with a lot of time away from family and friends. And I was living in this amazing part of the world, which people drive to visit. And I was the guy driving out of Cornwall on a Sunday night to spend my week in a Holiday Inn. Obviously, other hotel brands are available, but yeah, spending a lot of time away, working away, which I'd grown with the role. So I'd been passionate for years about progressing my career, and I'd engineered the position I'd found myself in, right? I'd worked towards that, but actually in the reality of delivering it, it was really enjoyable, maybe the role, but geographically that sort of put some other challenges and other pressures in. And I guess the other thing that probably made a difference was sort of the COVID period. So it was a bit of a reset button for me because I'd got into that habit of packing a bag on a Sunday night and spending the week away from home, and that's what I did. But actually, when COVID hit, and for 18 months, I ran my sales team remotely, as we all did. But it meant I was at home pretty much for 18 months, and I realised that my relationship with my partner, my children, and friends and family, and in myself, I was in a better spot. So I didn't really want to go back to that situation that I was in. So I guess before I joined Geek, I'd already adjusted that slightly and had made taken an active change in role, which addressed the work-life balance piece. But I was left really wanting to give more. I had sort of more to give into my own abilities as a sales leader, sales director, and experienced sales leader. But it was looking for a vehicle to be able to do that in my local area in Cornwall, and that is limited. And I guess that's where Geek came in, because it was that opportunity to use what the skill set I'm good at, use something I'm really passionate about, but actually in my local business community, which is the main reason, I guess, why I'm here today. Yeah.
I think the balance thing's always an interesting topic, and it's a very common theme across, I would say, well, essentially all of the geeks that are here, and I think that's a combination from what I've seen of COVID a bit, and also I think a time of life. I think what we want and what we need in life changes as we mature and we get a little bit older. And I think when we're
Yeah.
younger, we're willing to sacrifice a lot more things in the pursuit sometimes of the career success and the financial rewards of that. But I do think as we start to mature, what we want from life starts to evolve and change a little
Yeah.
bit, and therefore we have to carve different paths.
I think interestingly, it's what you think you want versus what you actually want. So, when you're chasing, like, being honest, you're chasing kind of like title, seniority, car package, all that sort of stuff that comes with the roles. You end up, it's kind of slightly for the wrong reasons, because actually you don't feel rewarded by that stuff, do you? Really, it's kind of, you don't get personal satisfaction from those things. You might do when you get involved with helping clients and helping businesses succeed and grow and things like that, but that's, I think it's slightly skewed, like you said, in terms of what you think you want. And it's kind of almost that's what you're doing. You get into a job and you're like, if you're driven and passionate, it's like, okay, well, what can I be promoted into? But a lot of the times as well, it's kind of not what the role you think it's going to be like, I guess, a little bit. And certainly with sales director roles, they can look really glamorous, but actually when I find myself staying away and things like that, not only are you doing your day job during the day in terms of your team and with clients and things like that, but then I may be entertaining and hosting in the evening, which again sounds fantastic, but actually it means your day is like starts at 7 in the morning and finishes at whatever time it might finish, entertaining customers. So yeah, it's very privileged to have had the opportunity to do that, and it was fantastic fun, and it was really enjoyable. So, but it's when you're doing it very regularly and it becomes part of the part of the role, and it's something that's expected. It changes the dynamic of it. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a huge shift, and I think part of that is because often people have been in that mode for such a long period of time that the thought of not pursuing that is difficult. And I remember going through that myself, maybe sort of, I suppose circa 9 years ago now, on the eve of starting the business. And I guess it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think the other thing as well, from often for most of us, from a young age, going through school and further education and stuff like that, we are kind of conditioned into, this is what to go and do, and this is what, work hard, get the promotion, work a bit
Yeah.
harder, get the promotion, earn more money, work harder, get the promotion, earn more money, take on more debt, bigger mortgage, all the other stuff that goes with it. So I guess my question then would be, how did you get over the psychological hurdle? Because I think it's a big one personally for people that, we have a life plan, and when we start thinking about doing other things, often there's a big hurdle there, which is, well, I always thought I would do this, 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 and then this, and then all of a sudden it's kind of actually I want to go off on a different path and an entrepreneurial path. How did you deal with that hurdle in your own mind?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I suppose if you looked at a lot of the reasons to be joining Geek or leaving that paid, employed, and salaried role, sometimes when you look at just if you simply wrote down like a pros and cons list, it kind of wouldn't stack up. So I needed to trust something I trusted in business for a long time, which was a little bit of my gut, really, I guess, in terms of something that it felt right and I knew it felt right. And I know I said this to off air, if you like, but I kind of felt like I was a geek before I joined. I felt like I was in it just felt right. So I overcame that hurdle for me probably by really trusting what, just felt right and gut instinct. And the sort of going the transition from being a employed sort of sales director to having my own business and being a sort of entrepreneur, if you like. I guess that was actually one of the benefits, is one of the things, and is that I'd actually had sort of entrepreneurial spirit
Yeah,
or desire to do that a little bit at some stage. And Geek offers you the ability to be able to do that, but with the support network of obviously a franchise. But you are your own business owner in your own right.
yeah,
So it is that sort of that was which I guess some people may see as being a bit scary, but to me that was kind of actually one of the things that was a tick in the box, the opportunity to be and run my own business.
yeah.
Um, I guess some of the fact of being a bit more hands-on with certain elements of the business. It's the stuff that I'm now doing within Geek that I haven't done for many years because I may have had other people supporting me with those functions and things like
Yeah,
that. That
yeah.
that's interesting. But it keeps you really sharp and close to your customers' challenges, and you not only are we assisting and helping businesses grow, we're going through that. We're doing that with our own businesses, right? So yeah, I think that's an interesting part of it.
So just go back to pre-joining. You were kind of in a fairly unique position that you found us originally. We had some nice conversations, and then it was kind of like it's not you, it's me. And the timing wasn't quite right, and there was a bit of a time gap there. I think it was probably nearly 2 years
Was.
in total. So I guess I got two questions loaded into one. The first thing is like, I suppose, what went on in those 2 years? What was your connection with us? I guess through that period, and then what kind of triggered you to come back in and kind of say, right,
Yeah.
the time is right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the first conversations I had early days, there was just that at the time it wasn't quite right, as you said, sort of personally for myself. And um, the timeline, like you said, it was nearly 2 years, which shocked me when I looked back. I remember looking at my emails and thinking, no, it wasn't 2 years ago, was it? But that time had flown by, so it had gone really quickly. But during that time, because there's a lot of content, to consume on social media and LinkedIn, I've kept a really close sort of watching brief, I guess, and continuing to see the business grow and new geeks join and um, yeah, the journey of Geek continue really. In hindsight, I should have kept in closer dialogue with you guys really about what was going on, because in those 2 years, in my head, it was always a case of revisiting, and really I was going away to probably put myself in a slightly stronger, not better necessarily, but just a stronger financial position to take a real run at launching the business and obviously purchasing the franchise. So I think I knew what I wanted to do. And like I said, I should, in hindsight, have had a much closer conversation with you guys rather than just doing it in the shadows and stalking you guys on all the media content. I consumed a serious amount of content. Yeah.
I think you said that to me on that first call when you sort of came back around. I think you said that like you had a plan, and your plan was to always come back to us. But
Yeah.
at the time that you come back to us, you just never told us
Yeah. Which
what,
is, which
what
is
that plan was.
Yeah, which is crazy, right? Really, but I guess, yeah, I was giving it watch brief. So a couple of the things that kind of brought me back to the table was just two things that sparked it, I guess, really, which was one, which was the launch of Sales Geek Solo, so the slightly different sort of model that's been launched, sitting within the larger scale up opportunity. just kind of just repeats a bit of interest in terms of the model and things like that. And then the second thing was just a little bit of geography. So obviously, as geeks were growing and more territories were being taken, it kind of builds a little sense of urgency. And then Nigel joined in Exeter
next
and
door.
next door, and that really then was like, right, okay. And I remember saying to you guys, and the same, they said, now, if somebody had announced like that Cornwall had been taken and there was a new geek and somebody was joining for Cornwall, I would have been absolutely gutted. I just would have been gutted. So I guess that combination of slight renewed conversation in and around solo, and yeah, geography, that sort of little bit of FOMO, I guess, in simple terms, yeah, made me restart that conversation. Initially, just talking about solo, but then quickly evolving back to scale up and the full franchise, which was definitely the right decision. Definitely the right decision for me personally. Yeah.
And I think it's a tricky thing with the territory thing because I guess they don't come around very often once they've gone either, right? So it's not like ordering a new car. You might have to wait 3 months when you could have had it in 3 weeks. It's like once they're gone, they're gone. And yeah, I guess probably a wake up call when the one next door goes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was because and I was just thinking because I wasn't having that dialogue with you, which, like I said, was a little crazy. I wouldn't have even been kind of given that heads up, I guess. So I sort of quickly re-engaged, and I guess then from that point, it was fairly full. It was fairly quick, I guess. So even though the lead-in was long. Then when I was having those sort of secondary conversations with you, I think you guys knew pretty early on that I was in, and decision was sort of made, and this is what I wanted to do. So, but it meant I'd had those couple of years of I guess seeing the business continue to grow, continuing seeing franchisees being successful, and the customer testimonial stuff that we share and things like that. And it was all just, I guess, reaffirmed the decision being the right one.
Yeah, yeah. I think that even from my perspective, I think for me it's important that people make the right decision. So in some respects, if someone's had a longer run into it, like you have, we absolutely know at the point that someone says, right, okay, I'm doing this. We know they're doing it for the right reasons because you had 2 years to find a reason to not do it.
Not to,
You
yeah,
had 2 years to find, you know, because I think there's always a bit with people that they'll come and speak to us. Their circumstances have changed. They'll have a chat with me, a chat with James. They might speak to some other geeks, and there's always that element of what am I missing? Where's the bad bits? And what bits are they hiding or whatever? And I guess ultimately over 2 years that gave you all the time in the world to find the chinks in the armor,
yeah, yeah.
as it were. So and for me, it gives me confidence, and I think we've seen that, and we'll get to um, where you're up to, and we'll get to the other record. So as well as being the furthest away geek, you are the proud owner of another Sales Geek record, which I will come back to in a minute. So hold the
Okay.
phone on that one. You are emblazoned on the wall here as having that record. Um, so at that point, timing was right. You've kind of made the decision. So just tell me through like how that whole kind of getting here physically, and obviously we had a week onboarding that's back in September, I think. Would have been
Yeah, yeah,
September.
yeah.
So tell me how that was in the lead up to that, and then what the week was like here with the onboarding training.
Yeah, I mean, the lead up to it was great. With lots of support from various members of the team, and I think that's the one thing I like about the pre-onboarding is, the opportunity to speak with yourself and Jay and Becky and the team, and there's lots of opportunities to get different people's perspectives and take on you joining, I guess, which is brilliant. And obviously all the information you need prior to onboarding is provided and things, which is good. And then yeah, came up due to geography, came up on Sunday night. I think the Blackburn couldn't make it on the Monday morning because of the timelines, which was great, and had a fantastic week with Mel and the team. Yeah, during onboarding, which I guess for me the thing that was most impressive during the week was the access to, like I said, the different elements of the business. So rather than when I've had sort of traditional onboarding or sort of training as you join inductions or whatever, you tend to get one person that takes you through a lot of the business, and it's
Yeah.
it can be hard yards if you like. But yeah, I had a week jam packed in terms of the agenda, but because it was different people coming in and out with their area of expertise in terms of finance and marketing, training, founder stories with yourself and things like that, it just is you get a really good feel for the journey of the business and then the expertise that's in the background that ultimately is going to be there to support you to build your business. That's what, the
Yeah.
team's there for. So.
What do you think that week gave you?
Yeah, I guess confidence it gave me like a really clear plan on what to do when I left Geek onboarding, and then how to actually take that out and grow the business. And fundamentally for me, that's why you look at purchasing one of the main reasons why you would look at a franchise model, right? Is because it's a proven, tried and tested. You've done hard yards already, made the adjustments where necessary, fine-tuned, and you're giving us the plan to, if you do this, then you will have a successful launch to your business. And even down to some of the details of sign of the frequency of activities and really good guidance. So not just going that this is a basket of stuff we're going to give you, you can go off and start now, talking about what you should be doing, why you should be doing it, how frequent you should be doing it, the sort of, the pace and attitude of how you approach these things, which is big for me. I'm a massive believer in terms of, the right attitude and energy and enthusiasm for this sort of opportunity makes a big difference. And even that was kind of talked about, not worrying about this bit yet, and let's go and do this first. So it was the level of detail, I guess, that was given to me in terms of that onboarding, just gave us the confidence to take that plan away and ultimately implement it. Yeah.
Yeah. And how do you? I always feel like there's always going to be an element of when people are commuting and traveling. Like obviously you've traveled further than anybody else in terms of a drive. You've had quite a few people fly in over the last week
Yeah.
or two, but in terms of a drive, I think you own the longest drive to the Sales Geek bunker. I guess as much as there'll be excitement and kind of like can't wait to get started, I've made this decision, I'm doing it. I always feel like there's always going to be a 5 or 10% thing there niggling away in people's head. Like, yeah, I've only spent a little bit of time with these guys, lots of calls, I've been to the bunker visit for a few hours, but like now I'm really going to get a feel for the team, for what's really here. I suppose what by the time you got to the end of that first week here, obviously it's only the first week of onboarding. Onboarding goes on for many weeks afterwards, but it's residentially here. What do you feel like by the time you got to that first week? Was there any other fears that were kind of allayed that you might have still had when you were driving up here?
Yeah, I think not in terms of probably fears. I think probably what surprised me a lot was the fact that I'd done 5 fairly busy and solid days of training during the onboarding, and like actually I should have been like pretty worn out by Friday, and kind of like that's like a felt like because it's a lot of content, a lot of training. But actually, I had like the opposite. So I left on the Friday, and I'm pretty enthusiastic by nature anyway myself. But I actually left with more energy on the Friday than I arrived with. So it's like infectious, the level of enthusiasm and passion for the business off the whole team, and like I was able to absorb that, I guess, during that week. And actually left absolutely, even more so wanting to just sort of crack on with it,
Yeah.
which was great. Which I think, that's kind of what I was surprised at. In terms of fears, I think it was just really nice to be able to obviously talk with yourself about some of the genuine like things that maybe pitfalls and challenges and some early days that you're equipping us with to overcome, because you've been there and delivered it, and now I guess fine-tuned it. So it was that having the true insights from yourself, I guess that helped overcome some of the whole. So what's this actually going to look like? Like you said, when
Yeah.
I actually, the whole like, yeah, like you said, leaving the bunker, driving home, and then eventually, you have that day one, and you're right, okay, yeah, I think because of the logistics of my previous role and things like that, I remember effectively dropping my company car back and doing like a handover and actually catching a train back down to Redruth Cornwall where I live. I think that was the moment I kind of had like, that was like when the little bit of realism sort of kicked in of like, this is really happening. But it genuinely didn't panic me, because I'd got this sort of this plan, that you're not left to just think, well, what do I need to do on Monday? Like, I don't know, I sort of hit the ground, running, and I guess I'd like to come on to that a little bit in a minute, but kind of hit the ground running, hit it with pace in terms of my activity and sort of attitude and things like that. And I think that made a big difference. But the onboarding week gave you everything you needed to do that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think sometimes the feedback we get on the Friday at the end of that week is that there's even more. Like, no matter how much research people have done and whatever they thought they were coming into, I think the feedback we get both at I suppose at a product level, but even more so at a knowledge of how to go and sell it, how to go and launch, how to go and find clients, how to go and talk about what we do, just kind of how detailed that is, and it's
Yeah.
always tricky for us because we have an amount of time with people before they join, so there's only so much we can show people until they kind of get here, which is really tricky. And we'd love to find a way to bring some of that forward where we can, but that's quite a common piece of feedback, actually, just how structured, how much detail there really is around how to actually go and do this
And
and
much.
find clients.
And I guess it's more important, isn't it, than covering, like you said, in terms of the product suites that we've got and the depth of information and the quality of product that we've got to share with people. That's we pick up on that as we go through the process. The main theme really was in and around launching a business and the support in growing and launching Geek as a business and as a territory and as a franchisee. That's what you want. That's the bit that you want the support and guidance and help with. And as you then come on to the delivering product and helping onboard clients and all that sort of stuff, it's a nice problem to have that we can, then dive back into as and when required, I guess. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. I think it's people's generally biggest fears. One will be like, can I do this in terms of kind of help the customers that Sales Geek exists to serve? And it's always we obviously identify a little bit of imposter syndrome from people around that element of it. And then the second thing will always be, the financial implications of, I need to start earning money in a certain time
Yeah.
frame, and like how much help do I get to go and do those? They're the two things that people often will
Yeah.
be most hung up about.
Yeah, I think the on touch on the first point there a little bit was about the having the ability or the products that we can help clients with. I think that's the really interesting piece. Post onboarding, I felt, I guess, equipped that I could sit and chat with any business owner and know that there was something within our armory of geek, if you like, that we had something we can work with them and we can support them on. And that gives you confidence to go and have conversations that I guess for most people that would join Sales Geek will have an industry sector, have a specialism, and myself particularly 20 years in the construction sector, and I'd also then niched into building regulations, which is pretty dry, but it was a really great vehicle of supporting clients with building regulations and in turn material supply and things. It feels weird to then not have a specialism, and you can feel a little bit like, well, hang on a minute, how can I go into the education sector or a tech sector or whatever and talk confidently about being able to help their business? But during onboarding and seeing the depth of the tools that we use to support customers gives you that confidence to be able to think, well, I can sit with a business owner, leader, or sales director, or whatever, or sales manager, or somebody, and we know we've got the mechanisms to be able to support them, not just with our own experience, but with this suite of products and tools that we've got as Sales Geek.
So you got out the traps fast, and actually the record that I referenced earlier was one of the things we've always kept tabs on at Sales Geek is the speed at which somebody acquires their first customer, and I think up until Tim, it was 2 or 3 days post onboarding. The record now stands at -2 days. I think it might be, or even it might even be
Might be
minus a
in
couple of
more
weeks.
weeks it was.
Yeah. So I guess, and actually, that's an interesting point, Tim, in that I think one of the nice things we see with all geeks is because of when they're leaving a role, and quite a lot of our guys have to go through that process because of where people leave in that role to go to. It's always very amicable. I mean, most businesses' worst nightmare is that someone leaves to go to a competitor. So people coming to us is actually a good outcome for a lot of employers when people leave. So it's always very amicable, and but sometimes there can be a time gap if someone's we onboard every 2 months, so there's never a massive time gap, but sometimes there can be a little bit of a little bit of a gap. But you were able to sort of balance leaving your role with kind of starting to think a bit about the business and identify opportunities. So How did you, if you don't mind talking about it, how did you find that kind of balance of kind of transitioning from kind of role into the new business?
Yeah, I guess you know you once you know where you're going in terms of your decisions made, and you know that you're going to be starting your own business and joining Sales Gig. I guess you then start thinking in a slightly different way of looking at businesses and future opportunities, I guess. And yeah, being lucky enough to, like I said, hit the ground running really with a client even ahead of me, academy officially starting within the previous sector and employer. So, which was great. Um, and I guess then from that point, you just start thinking really in your local geographical area about where you maybe able to have an impact and the sort of organisations and networking opportunities and things like that that you may be able to get involved with, and just try to get yourself ahead of the game a little bit, I guess, in understanding where some of your future activity, where you're going to focus your efforts on, what you might try in terms of networking organisations and anchor organisations that you may get involved with. And you can utilise that time, I suppose, to get your head into that mindset
Yeah.
of not only what you're going to do, but who you're going to sort of run at once you're out of the gates properly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I suppose on the subject of getting out the gates, I think this would be really good insight for people because we have a few of these videos with different geeks and a lot of, well, the other two or three that you'll find on YouTube now are the guys that have been here for a little bit longer, including John Whitby, who's about to renew after 5 years. But I think the phase that you're in now, the first 4 months, I think that is almost a bit that people are most interested in because that's the scary bit. How do you go
Yeah.
from being in the job, coming and training, starting a business, and then getting out there and doing the stuff that leads you to customers? So how would you describe this first 4 months? I guess what's your life been like in the day to day, and kind of where do you find yourself today?
Yeah, so I've really enjoyed it. I've got to say, it's been something that I came out of the gates quickly. I guess I launched Sales Geek Cornwall officially 1st of October. I think the following week I was exhibiting at the Cornwall Business Show. So kind of like this comes back to me commenting earlier about sort of my pace and enthusiasm, I guess, is that I didn't look at the show and think, oh, shall I attend or shall I go? I was like, right, let's get a stand and I'll be there. Within the first week of officially launching was probably quite ambitious, but yeah, it worked really well, and I had a lot of support from the events guys as well, just being honest about my position and story. And I think that's something that has stood me in good position actually within the local business community, is actually being really honest about the stage my business is at, the support I'm looking for, and had some really significant now connections that kind of looked after me in those early days. Because people like to help, right? We like to help. That's what we do. And I've found that from the local business community, and not just from people who want to be, provide me services or potentially utilize our services, some actually genuinely neutral, sort of like they just want to help and support. So yeah, first week was kind of straight into a business show. I remember first day I hit a networking event. So I wanted something in the diary like day one of like, this is what I'm going to do and like get straight out there. So yeah, it's been, I'd say, running at quite a pace, which I think has been important to get the start that I've had. So yeah, very visible in the local business community quite quickly. And chucking myself into stuff that I guess instead of, maybe attending networking events, I've looked for like speaker opportunities as well, where we can share some of our knowledge and as an educational piece. And I think that's rather than maybe getting into the scene and waiting for those opportunities, I've kind of not been afraid to ask for them, really early days. So sometimes the first time I've met a room of people at a networking event might have been, I'm actually up on say stage, might be, plenty of venues in Cornwall aren't with a stage, but in front of the audience, I guess talking to people about some challenges that their businesses will face and that resonate with them. And it's just been a really great way of then I think possibly like not fast forwarding necessarily, but certainly sort of getting those conversations to sort of happen and acquire clients quite early on. And I guess with the business show, if I look at that, that was week. that was literally like within my first full week or in the second week, if that makes sense, it landed. And, we've acquired, I sit here today and, I've acquired clients at that show that I'm now delivering for in January, that sort of 4 months later. So it shows that actually not having that nervousness about should I do it, and actually a little bit of an attitude of just let's just crack on and do it. Right attitude, energy, and enthusiasm, and yeah, it's worked really well. In terms of the day to day, I found that really interesting as a character that liked a varied role, whether it be from a networking point of view, speaker opportunities, as I said, and then further conversations with potential clients, sitting down and finding out more about their challenges and their business, and also the geographical challenges that you get, which I'm sure is the same in any patch where you may get like regional and geographical nuances. That's like been really interesting to do as well. So sort of every day is quite varied, which for me as a character works really well. I guess I'm moving now into that phase of clients starting to establish a little bit more and starting to deliver more training and more of your sales director sort of element, less of the business establishment and client acquisition piece. And now I'm starting to blend the acquiring new business with delivering new business, which is going to be really interesting for me. But no, obviously a nice and a natural part of the process for me.
So I'm going to come back to delivery in a second. So I suppose the great thing is you are, let's say 4 months in doing delivery, which is great, which means you've done the first bit, which is finding clients. So how, in terms of that transition from, I know you were like you said, like in terms of career wise, you were sort of semi-local over those last kind of couple of years, but I suppose it was still your first step into doing business properly
Locally.
in
Yeah,
the
yeah,
town that you
yeah,
live in. How did you find that transition is my first part of my question. The
yeah,
second part of my question is, I think where you're based is really interesting because one sort of concern or reservation we get from people is the perception will be, in order for this to work best and have the most success, I need to live in London or Manchester or in Birmingham. So when we speak to people that are in slightly more rural locations or somewhere they don't see as a centre for big business, people can get nervous about that. And what I love about where you are and the success that you've had in the first 4 months is, um, yeah, like you said, that's where people go on holiday, right? so,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
how have you found Cornwall as as a quite a rural location, and how have you found that transition from working in a market vertical to actually
Yeah,
doing business where you live?
yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. I guess that's something that people again can be nervous about is because you build, 20 years of a construction sector network, right? But like you said, most of that was kind of outside of county. There was some in county, some in Cornwall, but a huge vast majority of my recent years have been spent traveling out of county and working for sort of larger organizations, I guess. So I didn't really have a business. I didn't have a business network or business community. Um, so that comes back to that whole just, getting out there and building and establishing the brand. And there's no sort of substitute, I guess, for effort, really,
Yeah.
in terms of, if somebody thinks that, you can put a few posts on LinkedIn and, a bit of clever social media content and you're building a brand. I think with Sales Geek, it's, although that's an element of it, really the brand building comes from having conversations with people in rooms, right? And that's how I built the sort of community. So yeah, I have, been very, very active in terms of people see me at plenty of events. Um, and yeah, and as I touched on a minute ago, actually, I think, where appropriate, using a little bit of honesty about the whole, finding advocates and supporters of what you're trying to do is really powerful. And few of those have come out of areas where there may be other fractionals, other people working in a different product area, if you like, in terms of support area, that being in finance or something like that, but
Yeah.
equally working as a fractional business. So sort of fellow fractionals is good. Obviously fellow geeks to support you with sort of, that initial bit of activity. But just getting into the local business community and having the conversations with people and finding those early days supporters that they've made like a massive difference. Um, and you touched on it on onboarding about the sort of advocacy sort of pieces. That there's lots of people that you'll meet that will never be a direct customer, but are potentially talking to lots of our customers,
Yeah.
and can spot the opportunities to introduce us and involve us, in either their customer network or, by association. And yeah, I think there's a level of trust that needs to be established, I guess, quite quickly. But that circles back to a little bit about the speaker opportunities I touched on, is that if I've stood and spoken about the challenges in the sales environment, or how AI is impacting, the sales environment, and things like that, or, how challenging trading conditions are affecting people and how we might overcome it. I
Yeah.
guess that may have accelerated that trust a little bit, because I've had the opportunity to share a little bit about my own knowledge and experience with people, so they can, I guess, look and hear and feel how I am as an individual, and think, well, look, this is somebody that I'm, happy to have a conversation with further. So then that's that sort of early days, yeah, sort of piece about the business
Those
community.
areas. And how have you found, I suppose, turning the activity? Because, like you say, that is just effort. And I guess I'm a great believer in, certainly for any startup, let alone a Sales Geek startup, spend the currency that you have, which for a new business is, well, in our
Time,
world, is time
yeah,
rather than money.
yeah,
So a lot of our onboarding training, as you know, is this is how to go and invest time, which is just effort. You just got to keep showing up, keep
just
showing up.
yeah.
So I suppose the burning question, I think, is how have you found turning the activity? So you've been networking, you've done the expos. I know you've done some nice speaking gigs as well that you've found your way into, and again, you've had to engineer that to go and do
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
How did you find turning activity into paying customers?
I don't want to curse it because that's fairly early on, but easy, maybe easier than I thought a little bit.
Okay.
I guess, the way we do business with our customers and our clients is quite relaxed. And like you said, those conversations that we have early days with people is about them and their business. And that's something that sales people are really passionate about. Right. And I think that means that the process feels quite natural. And then by the time we're sitting down and having a conversation about actually being within somebody's business as their fractional sales director or sales trainer, they've kind of probably maybe already, a bit like me when I was doing Geek, already maybe made their mind up by the time we're sitting down and actually having a slightly more, I wouldn't even call it a formal chat, that sort of coffee conversation where we're talking, we're outside of a networking environment. We've agreed to have a little bit of a deeper conversation. And yeah, I mean, it's not a case of converting all of those into clients, because that wouldn't be, yeah, that's not going to happen, I guess. But it's quite quickly became apparent with lots of people that, yeah, we're gonna let's do this. This is something you can support me with, etc. Particularly from the training point of view, I guess the training is kind of been a stronger start for me, maybe than anticipated, between our traditional business mix, maybe. But yeah, it's been easier, I think. Geographically, you touched on it earlier, is that people assume that there are a lot of micro businesses and one man bands and solopreneurs and things like that in Cornwall, but there are actually larger businesses that kind of operate and lean into the fact that you no longer have to be in central London or in central Manchester. And I've come across businesses in my hometown that I never knew were there, like, in the tech sector, and it's like, oh, how many guys do you employ? And it's like, oh, 65. And I'm like, you got 65 people working for you in Red Roof.
Brilliant.
So some bigger interesting businesses, as well as, some interesting conversations have started to develop a little bit in and around even the hospitality sector recently, and things like that, and things that necessarily you may not associate as directly salespeople, but these are people that are representing businesses and companies, and by default are in sales. So there's sort of little nuances within Cornwall that I guess that I'll get involved with. But there are still some really large concerns and anchor organisations and colleges and things like that that we were working with and things. So yeah, there's a misconception, I guess, a little bit about the business community in Cornwall. I think I'd actually fallen into that trap as well, but there's people punching well above their weight, I guess, out of Cornwall, with more than cider and pasties, right?
There's nothing more embarrassing. I had this as well. My excuse was I'd only lived where I lived for about 3 years at the point I'd started the business, but I'd be out networking or involved in something. You meet someone who's got a really good business. Go, oh, where are you based? Just around the corner from your house.
Yeah, yeah.
You didn't even know they existed. And
Didn't know, yeah.
I think that's the thing when you work in a sector. I was to say I spent 10 or 12 years in a particular industry pre-sales geek. It's amazing how like what you don't see locally,
Yeah.
and you'd have found it now, I'm sure, even after a few months with the amount of networking that goes on, the business expos that go on, the stuff that's there along with the businesses are there. They've been there the whole time. You just didn't need
Didn't
to see
know.
it before
Yeah,
to
yeah.
get it.
And the level of expertise, like there's some really quality, like people, having worked in larger corporate organizations, I guess what's been surprising is the quality as well and the level of, knowledge and sometimes what they're actually, like I said, achieving out of maybe a fairly small office in Cornwall, and that they've got these massive clients sometimes like globally they're working for, and really like I said punching above their weight with some specific skill set that they're good at or a product that they major in, and I think COVID and things like that as well has changed a little bit of that landscape, and it's probably meant that actually we can do even more now because we are geographically correct, remote and rural, as you say, but actually it's probably opened up more businesses to be able to, punch above their weight in Cornwall. And there's the tech community is really thriving down here actually, which again was completely off my radar, but yeah, very, very strong tech community. So, and you've got specific networking opportunities within those sectors as well, and a real strong community feel where people are helping each other as well. So I think, like you said, it's they're kind of passionate about their own geography and proud of that. So
Yeah.
there's actually a really good, strong business and networking community in Cornwall, some sector specific, some general, but there's one thing they've all got in common, and that's the geography of the Cornwall. Because some of the challenges, I guess, for businesses is that whole, to expand and grow, some businesses do that geographically, don't they? They start on the map and they just grow geographically. You can't do that in Cornwall. You're in the water if you
That's
do.
true. Yeah, that's true.
So you kind of like you have to expand in different ways, and grow in different ways. So I think there's some sort of shared common ground with the business community because it's that whole misconception stuff. That's common ground, geography, the common ground, and I guess sometimes the retention of good talent is an issue down here as well. Sometimes we do get that sort of people drawing, maybe drawing you out of county and, out of Cornwall and Plymouth and yeah, maybe with some draw into the bigger cities and stuff like that. So retaining good talent and things like that is another bit of a challenge, I think, which obviously we can help with here.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I love the local passion thing, and I found that here as well, where we are in Lancashire again. I've moved here about 3 years before, and actually very quickly got drawn into that and the passion for the county and what it stands for, and again the challenges that it has, and actually so much so that I still find it bizarre ending up becoming a Lancashire ambassador under Marketing Lancashire, having spent the first 30 years of my life living in the south, but
Yeah.
really buying into that, and I think. That's when you mentioned way back at the beginning of the conversation about, sitting down and writing the pros and cons list. I think the challenge when you do that pre-joining is there's so much stuff you don't yet know around, just how different life is going to be, the networks that you're going to create, the conversations that you're going to have, the even some of the extracurricular stuff you get to do as a result of, doing business in this way. And for me, that was a big part of it. If somebody would have said to me 9 years ago before I started Sales Geek that would have got involved, at a I suppose philanthropic kind of like a local level, kind of doing stuff on the ground that really makes a difference. Part of that being what we do for our services, but also becoming a valuable member of my community in a
Yeah.
country that I was less familiar with. I couldn't have written up on my pros and cons list because I just didn't know
Didn't
it.
know it was going to be, yeah, didn't know it was going to be a byproduct. Yeah, there's something now really, even some simple stuff, when you're out and about in the local business community, and you'll see faces that, you met through networking or potential bump into a client or whatever it might be. And it's just nice to have that feeling like you're putting something back into the local business community. And I think importantly as well is, when you look at joining Sales Geek, you're thinking about what you've done for businesses previously in your sales director career, in terms of whether that be changing market share or introducing new products or bringing in a new team members or whatever that might be. And it's rewarding. It's really rewarding, but it's even more rewarding if you can do that in your local business community, right? So if we can turn the dial a little bit for people, business owners, in terms of the headline revenue, or help bring new people into the business, and see them grow and thrive and things like that. That's it adds another level when you know that it's something local to you and you can see those sort of businesses thrive, I guess. Yeah. And even again, even more so, it's tough trading conditions for a lot of businesses, and to be able to turn around and say that, okay, I can help and support with that a little bit in some way, whatever that might be. Um, it's, like I said, from a rewarding point of view, it's a big thing that kind of was probably not, like you said, on that pros and cons list. It was just
Yeah.
like a bit of a subtext. Yeah.
Yeah, I even think if I dig out my notes from when I was writing out my plan for starting the business, and I thought about, okay, who would a customer look like? I was miles away actually from the customers that I'm serving, and actually one of those differences, was just triggered when you're saying what you're saying was, I guess I'd sort of assumed that most of my customers would be ambitious businesses that were already growing, that just wanted some help to keep on their growth curve. And yes, I've been fortunate to have a bunch of those customers, but the other half of the customers are actually people who are in need of help. They don't just want the help for
Yeah.
success; they actually need the help. And I think to your point, um, the current economic conditions are driving that even more. And I think we've seen that generally as a brand through the back end of last year and into the early part of this year. Often as we sit here now, kind of early January, December and early Jan can be a little bit quiet and a bit sleepy to get going, but actually we had the busiest December we've ever had for new business onboarding for you guys, but also it's the fastest start we've had. I know you've had a
Yeah.
reasonably fast start as well with some new customers already in the first 2 weeks of the new year. I think a lot of that is fueled by the current economic conditions as well.
Yeah, yeah. Which I think, if I actually go back to one of your previous questions about if there was anything niggling me in terms of fear of joining, I guess timing of it a little bit, maybe with people saying, getting in my ear, sort of going, well, is it a good time to be launching a business now? And it's kind of like, because of the economic trading conditions, which have, what's clear is it's impacting every sector pretty much, right?
Yeah.
It's not industry specific, or sector specific. It's tough trading conditions across the board for a lot of people. So I guess that was probably something that was a little bit of a fear factor, but I reframed that, and having some conversations with you guys as well, as it made me realize that now was exactly the right time to do it,
Yeah, yeah,
because that's when people need the help. When things are booming and it's great, you don't need geeks help. You need it when you're either looking to grow, or you said, like you said, looking to help. So I think, and it's proven true in terms of, yeah, people are very receptive to people that can help them on help them change the revenue line effectively. And I think so many people default, and I guess frustratingly for us, people default quite often to take, when looking at a financial decision and making their business viable and more sustainable during tough economic times. They look at reducing costs and efficiencies and things like that. Tends to be the default, as opposed to looking at, well, can I adjust that top line revenue number? Can I
yeah.
turn that dial, which means I don't need to worry about my costs so much, etc. So, and I think it's weird because I guess people go to default to taking cost out and things like that, because that's absolutely controllable and you can do that fairly quickly. And actually adjusting the revenue may be arguably slightly harder and slightly more out of your control. But it's certainly an area, I guess, that we can, with confidence, turn around and say, well, yeah, it isn't your only option is to look at reducing costs and creating better efficiencies. Is actually, we can look at this top end revenue number, how we change that, and that's how we change the landscape of tough trading conditions. Right? You can. I'm a firm believer in trading out of it. And again, going back to some of these businesses. that I've been lucky enough to sort of see and talk to over the last few months is there are people that are really growing and thriving in pretty tough trading conditions, and it's tapping into, well, why, what are they doing that maybe others aren't, and approaching it, tapping into that attitude, and the reframing piece of looking at difficult trading conditions and how you overcome it.
Oh, definitely. I think bizarrely, certainly over the last 9 years, but this will be contrary to most people's perspectives. The toughest period we've had for client acquisition was when we had that little micro economic boom, like in 2022, before inflation went crazy, because everyone was growing without having to really try. And often when people are succeeding, they don't ask for help in this, or they don't look for help in the same way. And I guess with the benefit of time now, what I've realized is that whatever the economic conditions are, or global situation or politics, all these variables that the news channels fill us up on, there's always opportunity. And I guess as we've diversified product mix, in certain sets of conditions, one goes up, the other one comes down, and the other conditions kind of one goes the other way. And we've seen that over a period of time. I think we've even seen it within the franchise community. We've got guys now that are coming around to sort of 5 years in and looking to renew. And even in that 5 years, let alone my 9 years, I think about how much has gone on. I forget the world, but like in the UK during that period of time, with
Yeah.
COVID and inflation and kind of like little micro recessions and 45 prime ministers and all this sort of stuff. And actually, I'm a great believer in, if I look at how consistent some of those guys have been during that period of time, I think so much of it is what you tell yourself it will be, and the capacity to go and
100%.
hunt out opportunities.
Yeah. I think over the last few months, some of the more, seeing successful businesses, that one of the common ground is that they actually don't pay too much attention
Yeah,
to these outside factors.
yeah,
And actually, they've either got a really strong vision of what they're trying to achieve, and that's all they focus on. And I think, I suppose I've tried to adopt that a little bit with my launch in terms of, oh, it's not great timing, and I'm launching in the last quarter, and then I'm going to be running into Christmas. And, I could have had a totally different attitude, and I just didn't. It was like, yeah, launch in October. And, I guess. I very much saw those first few months as like building the brand, and the brand awareness, and my own personal brand and exposure within the community. But it was, with the right level of attitude and enthusiasm, that wasn't, I wasn't really sort of worried about running into Christmas and stuff like that. And the young, how, you don't need to see a lot of news to understand there's a lot of, there's a lot of negative media and press as well, and lots of
yeah.
things going on in the world that are outside of your control, but it's easy to affect your attitude and mindset. So I think it's, there's definitely a common factor in terms of limiting the intake of that and being focused on what you're trying to deliver.
Oh, definitely, definitely. So you mentioned a few minutes ago when we were talking about Cornwall and what you're doing locally, you use the word community a lot, and I'm a great believer in the. I guess all geeks kind of end up with two new communities: the network, that's well, the community or the tribe that they build where they live, but also becoming part of the Sales Geek community. So could you just give us some insight on what that looks like from a Sales Geek community perspective? Again, you are 8 hours away in the car. You couldn't be any further from HQ if you tried. So how has that felt in terms of kind of coming into this tribe of geeks, even though you're as far away as you are?
Yeah. I guess the geography isn't felt too much because of the ways and mediums that we communicate with each other as a team. Whether that be on what whether that be on WhatsApp, on video calls. In terms of training sessions and things like that that are run live to support the franchise network and things like that. So you feel very much part of something from an HQ position. HQ, yeah, position, and equally we've got our own little sort of sub team in the south that's emerged.
Yeah, yeah.
Which Lisa in Essex has sort of led the way on, which is fantastic. And with those opportunities, you're able to feed into the energy and the enthusiasm from the other geeks. And I guess by default, most of us are pretty passionate, energetic, enthusiastic, individuals, because that's needed to do what we do as a role and as business owners. So you can tap into that, and it's a great little micro I guess, injection of reminding you why you're doing what you're doing if you're having a tough day. I've got to say, I guess 4 months in, I don't know how long the honeymoon period lasts for. I think it's because it just continues because I just feel like it's gone really quickly and I've loved every minute of it so far, genuinely. So, but I guess if I did need that injection of like, I was having a bit of a tough day, there's definitely communities to tap into in terms of fellow geeks, giving that support, but also up at HQ, and like I said, I think that blended approach of whether that be on Teams or a webinar or WhatsApp or a phone call or whatever, even though I can't meet you in the
Yeah.
pub for a pint on a Friday afternoon, it's not, it still feels very much like a community, yeah, from Geek. And equally, within the local community, that started to happen as well, where I can see personal relationships,
Yeah.
emerging and people, and you kind of spending time with people, so I guess maybe socially is a bit stronger word, but yeah,
Yeah.
certainly a more personal relationship with people in my local business community, um, which is really, really nice, So I think it's really interesting point actually because you think, oh, well, I'm going to lean completely on the franchise network for that support, but actually it's there right in your local
Yeah.
community. And I touched on earlier, there've been some people that have really like taken me under their wing, and whether that be talking about challenges together, it could be talking about potential opportunities together, and helping them build their communities, etc. It can be, but there's definitely a lot of people that have been willing to support my journey, and I guess in a business growth and acquisition of customers point of view, that's probably quite powerful in terms of if people are talking about you when you're not in the room, and I think that's, I hope, that I guess has happened and people have brought me into maybe some more slightly off book networking events as well, where, which is another whole sort of sub thing where, it's not a network event that's open to everybody to attend, but maybe groups of some business leaders and people that are getting together and sharing best practice and talking about their challenges in a more candid environment. And I've been lucky enough to sort of find my way into those groups as well, and that, so I think that the community piece, it's worth investing some time, real time and effort in fostering those genuine relationships with people in the local business community. It's very powerful, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's another thing for me would have been on my list of things I couldn't have written on my pros and cons list because I had no foresight of it. But I was exactly the same as you, and I think that I underestimated just how different it would feel going out into the market as a startup, as a business owner, networking with primarily other business owners who care about the local area. So therefore, they're cheering you on, and it's kind of I think when the term social selling gets used, everyone automatically thinks LinkedIn, Facebook,
Yeah,
email. But actually,
yeah.
this is truly social selling.
Yeah, yeah,
And for me, and I think certainly for my personality anyway, it was the most comfortable fit I think I've ever had in my sales career. Actually, the
yeah,
way in which we did business, whilst simultaneously feeling very supported by that group of
yeah.
people.
I
Um,
guess sorry, what was you going?
no, that's fine. Like, I was going to ask you a different question, so you carry on, man.
I was just going to say, I guess there's also a little subtle nuance which I've had to try and navigate slightly, which is that whole when to be a bit more vulnerable and a bit more candid with people within the community.
Yeah,
So that whole like, look, actually, I'm pretty much brand new and this is what I'm trying to do, and I'd love some help if you can help us. Versus those conversations where actually you may be talking to a potential client where you actually still need to be a rounded expert that
credible.
potentially
Yeah,
can help them and their business. So there is that sort of subtlety between, is the whole, building that community and asking for help and actually being perceived as the guy who can give the help, I guess, So
yeah.
that's kind of like interesting. But I guess, you can tell when and where, but
Yeah,
yeah.
definitely. Well, listen, man, I'm gonna round this off a little bit now. I'm conscious we're probably around about an hour, and I promise not to keep you much longer than that. So,
No reason.
so I've got two questions left for you, Tim, if I can. So the first one would be, I suppose we're sat here in January. You can tell it's January because I'm drinking water. The sun's already set behind me on the cathedral. Um, what are the plans for not just a year ahead, but beyond? What 4 months in, you've got a feel for it, you've got a flavour for it. Kind of, hopefully, you're probably feeling a bit more confident now than you would have done a few months ago. What are the plans going forward?
Plans for the future, yeah, absolutely. So I guess some of the basics of just continuing to grow the brand and be seen as, in the local, the local Cornish business community is somebody to go to for help in relation to sales, right? Because whether that be training or mentoring or leadership or whatever, like we're able to help and go back to that basket of products or the toolbox that we've got to support customers with. There's always that sort of opportunity to grow that, and then hopefully we can look to grow and scale the actual business in terms of um, headcount and looking at delivering more, having more geeks within Sales Geek Cornwall and helping more businesses. I guess growing on the training side of it. I think I touched on it earlier. I think there's certainly some actual little niches and hospitality is an interesting one that I'm starting to explore now, where some real sort of front of house and front end sort of entry level people that may not see that they're salespeople, but there's some support to be had. And equally, not only does that help and train and nurture talent, it also helps this revenue thing that's an issue for most businesses at the moment in terms of their front of house being really, really experienced. So yeah, I think start to develop the propositions with a little bit of a geographical twist on it, maybe, as well as grow the business to a point where I'm going to need some support with delivery with clients. Yeah, absolutely, and it's something that I've touched on a few times today, so we won't touch on it one last time. Is those opportunities, those speak opportunities to really genuinely give something back and a little bit of education back to people in terms of sales training in the sales arena. That is something that I would continue or want to continue to do, and has not only been part of the reason for the success early days for me, it's because I genuinely passionately want to do it. And going back to the Institute of Sales Professionals, the ISP, and being involved with them before being a geek was because I wanted to give something back to help people and ultimately, change the way the world perceives sales, right?
Amen.
So,
Amen.
yeah.
Right, so last question for me to bring us home. Somebody's watching this now, they're kind of going through the whole kind of should I, shouldn't I process. They may have read the prospectus and maybe even had a chat with a couple of us in here. You're 4 months in. What would you say to that? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I guess the getting out of your own way is a huge thing, right? It's the as I said earlier, if you looked at this in a really logical way, it may be quite difficult to justify it, particularly if you're actually currently in a live and well remunerated package and all the trimmings that come with a typical sort of sales director role. And I guess it does take a bit to get your head into that headspace of that I can do this and yeah, the opportunity there that the sales gig gives you is to run your own business, and be your own business leader in the local community, but with the support of the franchise. And for me, that's been the perfect blend, I guess, of making it a really viable proposition for me personally. And I think there's probably lots of other sales leaders it resonates with that you want to utilize your skill set, something you spent years in fine tuning and honing and enjoy delivering, but to be able to do that for yourself as opposed to for a company is really powerful and something that stunning that you can sort of replicate. So yeah, get out of your own way and crack on with it.
Good advice, man. Good advice. Tim, thank you very much. It's been great to catch up,
Yeah,
buddy.
it's been really good to catch up.
Yeah, I obviously really appreciate your time. I'm sure this has been enormously valuable, certainly for people that are kind of looking at this and weighing this up versus the other life options that they've got. But if you're watching this, I would say if you've been inspired by Tim's journey, I'd encourage you to do one or two things. The first one is go and connect with Tim on LinkedIn and keep following his journey because I can be absolutely certain there's some great things to come. But also keep speaking to the HQ team here and finding out how you can replicate that. Thank you very much, Tim,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah,
we'll see you
brilliant.
again soon.
Cheers, Richard. Thanks very much.